Okay, so this is a Kim Barnes quote. Jack Nisbet continues to educate, entertain, and mesmerize with this meticulously written and researched story of two people of destiny whose intelligence and passion transformed our awareness and understanding of the Northwest. And so that's a quote about his newest book. And if you want to hear more about that, he's actually going to be speaking in Okanagan on March 20th as part of the Okanology series. So you can come and hear Jack speak twice in 1 month in Okanagan County. Wow, that may never happen again. That's really special. So I don't know, we didn't coordinate that intentionally, it just happened. But you know you have a great speaker when multiple people want to come and have him speak all in the same month. Every time I've heard Jack speak, I've wished that it would go on longer. I'm really pleased that he can come back. Last time he spoke about David Douglas, and today he's going to speak about Wes Wehr. And I'm curious to learn more about this character who has shaped our understanding of our local geology and our history here. So let's welcome Jack Nisbet. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Julie. And we'll try to make sure that the microphone is right.
Can you hear him okay?
Yeah. What do you think? Is that better? Okay, let's try that. Okay, I love coming to the Okanagan, to all parts of the Okanagan. And the reason is I like the communities up and down the valley. I was talking to Julie earlier about how I get to go to all these places and see how different communities are dealing with their challenges. And it's a never-ending source of interest to me, but it also goes on and on. And I spend a lot of time in public schools and talking to groups like this, trying to expand people's notions of time. That's what I'm often trying to do when I write. And often I am talking about one species and one person, and like trying to stomp down the reed canary grass one plant at a time. But what I'd like to do tonight is read an edited version of a chapter from a book, my last book, Ancient Places, about this man, Wes Wehr, who was from outside of the Okanagan Highlands and outside of a lot of places. A lot of people thought he was an alien in many ways. And he got a take on this place over time that I guess it helped me understand, and it helped me spread out my idea of time in a way that seemed valuable and real poignant for what we're trying to do right now at Triple Creek and a lot of other places. So I'm going to go through this. I really like the visuals that go with Wes's story, and when you do a book, you don't get to get the visuals in, so when you get to do a talk, you do that. And there was this wonderful photographer around Seattle in the 50s and 60s named Mary Randlett, who made a practice of taking pictures of artists and jazz musicians and people like that. And this is a photograph she did of Wes as a young man. And more of hers will show up. Wes Wehr was born on the west side of the Cascades in 1929. And from an early age, his precocious intelligence led him to pursue both classical music and concrete connections to the composers he adored. A letter-writing campaign when he was 12 years old brought him the autographs of Arnold Schoenberg, Dmitri Shostakovich, Jean Sibelius, and Igor Stravinsky. Always one to look beyond the obvious, Wehr then began to diversify his signature cache until it included blues progenitor W.C. Handy, Henri Matisse, George Bernard Shaw, and Albert Einstein, all by the time he was 15 years old. As a teenage usher at a popular Seattle theater, Wehr reveled in the thrill of interviewing luminaries ranging from Bela Lugosi to Paul Robeson for his high school newspaper. He learned when to linger in the shadows backstage and when to make a decisive introduction. Early on, Wehr's collecting bug extended to agates and unusual shells. Which he connected to the kind of timeless beauty he always felt in the presence of fine art. When I was young, he wrote later, I had no inkling that in time I'd become a paleontologist, but everywhere I went, I came upon traces of ancient life. And that could be Miles's quote, I think. A pair of accomplished musical scores Wehr wrote in high school helped him to gain entry to the University of Washington in 1947. Within 2 years, he had won a fellowship for his original compositions. When one of his professors took a brief vacation, Wes, slight of frame, blue-eyed, full of enthusiasm, and not yet 20 years old, found himself teaching piano composition to an artist named Mark Tobey. Tobey, by then pushing 60 and well-established as a world art star, became lifelong friends with Wes and introduced him to Seattle's bohemian art scene. Mark Tobey kept a piano wherever he lived and always played his newest creations for Wehr. Both men also shared an interest in natural artifacts and occasionally toured the mineral collections at the Burt Museum together. Tobey cultivated associates on a high level, and Wehr was never shy about tagging along. Wes had this weird sense for famous people, one of his colleagues recalled. I don't know why. Wehr developed a habit of scribbling down snippets of conversations with his eminent friends and eventually used them as raw material for a pair of memoirs. When the well-known poet Elizabeth Bishop arrived in Seattle to teach writing classes, Wehr sat in on her sessions and began another extended friendship. Around 1960, at a time when he was struggling with his musical career, he took up painting, creating tiny impressionistic landscapes with wax crayons. I tried to paint landscapes that were like the mysterious vistas I saw in polished petrified wood from the ginkgo petrified forest near Vantage in eastern Washington, he explained. Or like the landscapes on polished thunder egg agates from the Oregon desert. Wehr carried his small works around in a battered briefcase and would whip them out to show friends and at coffee shops around town. Elizabeth Bishop was charmed, and for Wes's first exhibit in the mid-1960s, she contributed a gallery note praising the painter's chilling sensation of time and space. In private, however, Bishop made a point of telling Wes he needed to widen his scope of experience. Around the same time, Mark Tobey, who at first had also encouraged Wes's painting, offered a critique that Wes recorded in one of his notebooks. Your landscapes have a nice poetic quality, Tobey said, but I can't always tell how strong your artistic will is. Maybe you need to go do something else for a while, like rock hounding, or go to the Oregon coast and collect some more agates. I predict that interest of yours in agates and fossils is going to save your neck in the long run. Wes also used ancient stones to build a relationship with the philosopher Suzanne Langer, who in the 1940s and 50s produced rigorous but popular books focused on theories of art and seeing. Langer provided a wellspring not only of analytical thought, but also of clear observation that could bridge artistic and intellectual boundaries. Wehr loved the fact that she always carried her cello with her whenever she traveled, but still knew how to make a picnic lunch for the field. When he visited Langer in New York State, they would comb famous trilobite sites for curios to take home. Like Tobey, Langer was almost 4 decades older than Wehr, and she wielded considerable influence on his mind. It's nearly impossible for me to figure out just when and how I began to evolve towards becoming a paleontologist, Wes wrote later. It was hardly a conscious decision. My visits to the paleontological rooms of great museums introduced me to a world of endlessly fascinating rare minerals, crystals, fossils, and their extraordinary aesthetic beauty. My embryonic painter's eye responded to them. I began to want to know about how they were formed, about the geological times and environments in which they once lived, just as I now lived in my own time and place. I think it was Suzanne Langer, with her insatiable interest in the scientific nature of things, combined with her naturalist appreciation for the outdoors, who was the single most important personal influence in directing my life towards that of a paleontologist. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Weir continued to ride into the wild with artist friends to explore the essence of things. Often their destination was the dry side of the Cascades, where they could search Crab Creek for petrified wood, or climb talus slopes in Moses Coulee to peer into rock shelters. In the desert at night, Weir ruminated, looking at the basalt cliffs and the full moon above them, I began to visualize what the landscape had once been. Those nights in the desert became meditations on how all things change, the landscape, human relationships, and the values that dominate one's life from season to season.